The key turned in the lock of my own front door with a strange resistance, as if the house had forgotten who its owner was after only 5 days of absence. My name is Mike Sanders. I'm 58 years old, and until 30 seconds ago, I believed that my son Ryan was the only family member I could trust after his mother passed away. Now, standing on the threshold of my home, I see that same son carrying my Italian leather sofa toward a moving truck, while a stranger who looks like a loan shark counts out bills and hands them over. The heart attack that had landed me in the hospital had been a warning, according to Dr. Morris. Excessive stress, uncontrolled blood pressure. You need to reduce the worries in your life, he had told me while signing my discharge papers. If I had known what was waiting for me at home, I would have preferred to stay connected to those heart monitors forever. Ryan did not see me immediately. He was too busy directing two men who were carrying out my mahogany dining table, the very same one where we had celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, every important moment of his life for the last 28 years. The table I had bought with the first big success of my construction company, the one his mother had chosen after weeks of searching for the perfect one. "Watch that corner," he yelled at one of the movers. "If you damage it, they will deduct it from the price." My heart, fresh out of intensive care, began to beat with a fury that the doctors definitely would not have approved of. But it was not just anger that I felt. It was something colder, more calculated, a clarity that only comes when you discover that the person you love most in the world has betrayed you in the most cruel way possible. "Ryan," I said with a calm voice, closing the door behind me. He spun around sharply, his eyes reflecting first surprise, then guilt, and finally an aggressive defensiveness that I did not recognize in the son I had raised. "Dad, I didn't expect you to get out of the hospital so soon." "Evidently." The man with the money walked over to Ryan, ignoring me completely. "This is the whole lot. The sofa, the table, the bookshelf, the television, the paintings. $10,000, just like we agreed." $10,000. Ryan was selling the furniture of my house, the memories of 30 years of marriage with his mother, for $10,000. "Yes, that is everything," Ryan responded, avoiding my gaze. "The rest is in my room." "That is off limits." "Ryan, I need to talk to you," I said with a tranquility that surprised even myself. "Dad, I can explain everything. I just need a moment to finish this." "Oh, there is no rush," I replied, sitting down on the only chair left in my living room, a plastic chair that he had probably brought in from the kitchen. "I will wait." The next 20 minutes were surreal. I watched as they dismantled my home piece by piece, while Ryan coordinated everything with the efficiency of someone who had planned this operation meticulously. Every piece of furniture that went out that door took a memory with it. The sofa where Ryan had slept when he had nightmares as a child. The table where he had done his elementary school homework. The bookshelf where he kept the trophies from his swim meets. When the truck finally drove away, leaving the living room practically empty, Ryan sat down in front of me on another plastic chair he had brought from the kitchen. "Dad, I know what you are thinking, but—" "Do you know what I am thinking?" I interrupted him. "Do you really think you know what is going through the mind of a man who has just discovered that his only son sold the furniture of his house while he was fighting for his life in a hospital?" Ryan lowered his gaze. "I have problems, Dad. Big problems." "Problems of what kind?" "Debts. A lot of debts. Gambling, among other things." "How much do you owe Ryan?" He stayed silent for a long moment, probably calculating how much truth he could reveal without completely destroying our relationship. $50,000. 50,000? My heart skipped a beat, and not because of cardiac problems, but from pure shock. Ryan owed $50,000. He had sold my furniture for $10,000, which meant he still needed $40,000 more. And who do you owe that amount to? To people who do not accept delays in payments. Dangerous people. Very dangerous. I stood up slowly from the plastic chair and walked toward the window that looked out onto the street. Outside, life continued as normal. Kids playing neighbors, watering their lawns, the world following its course, while mine was crumbling silently. Ryan, when were you planning to tell me about these debts? I don't know, Dad. I hoped I could solve it without involving you. By selling my furniture, it was just the beginning. I thought if I could get those $10,000, I would have time to think about how to get the rest. I turned toward him, studying his face. Ryan had inherited his mother's green eyes, but in this moment there was not a trace of the warmth I remembered in her. There was only desperation and something that I found even more disturbing, a complete absence of remorse. Ryan, do you know what is the most painful part of all this? What? It is not that you sold my furniture. It is not that you have debts. It is not even that you waited until I was in the hospital to do it. Then what? It is that at no moment during this conversation have you said that you are sorry. You have not shown even an ounce of remorse for having betrayed my trust. Ryan stood up, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes that froze my blood. Resentment. Remorse. Dad, I have lived my whole life in your shadow. Everything I have, everything I am depends on you. Do you know what that is like? Do you know what it is like to be a 28-year-old man who cannot make a decision without his father's permission? I never... Always, he shouted, interrupting me. You have always controlled everything. My education, my job at your company, even my marriage went to hell, because my wife got tired of competing with my dad for attention. His words hit me like punches. Was it true? Had I been so controlling that I had destroyed my own son's autonomy? So yes, he continued, I sold your furniture. And do you know what else, Dad? If it had been necessary, I would have sold the whole house, because for the first time in my life, I'm making decisions for myself without asking for your permission. And if those decisions kill you... Ryan smiled, but it was not a smile of joy. It was the smile of someone who had reached the bottom of the abyss and had decided he had nothing else to lose. Then at least I will have lived 5 minutes of my life being the owner of my own decisions. We stood looking at each other in my empty living room, father and son separated by an abyss that seemed impossible to cross. In that moment, I understood that the Ryan I had raised the boy who had slept in my arms when he had nightmares had disappeared. In his place remained a stranger who blamed me for all his failures and who had decided that my well-being was an acceptable price to pay for his freedom. Ryan, I said finally, you are right about one thing. It is time for you to make your own decisions. What do you mean? I smiled, and I knew my smile was as cold as his had been. I mean that from this moment on, you are going to discover exactly what it means to be completely independent of your father. Ryan looked at me with a mixture of confusion and defiance, as if he could not decide if my words had been a threat or a liberation. He headed toward the kitchen, one of the few spaces that still kept some basic furniture, and returned with 2 beers. He offered me one with a gesture that could have seemed conciliatory if it were not for the tension radiating from every muscle in his body. Dad, I know you are angry, but you need to understand the complete situation, he said. Opening his beer with a nervous movement I recognized from his childhood, he had always made that same gesture when he was about to confess some mischief. I'm listening, I replied, without touching the beer he had left on the window ledge. The debts are not just mine. I mean, technically they are, but they started because of the company. My company, Sanders Construction and Associates, which I had built for 30 years, brick by brick, contract by contract. The company where Ryan worked as a project manager since he graduated from college. What problems does the company have, Ryan? The Valley Towers project. There were irregularities. Valley Towers, a luxury residential complex we had started 2 years ago. The most ambitious project we had ever attempted. Ryan had insisted on managing it personally, arguing that he needed the experience to eventually take control of the company. What kind of irregularities? Ryan avoided my gaze, concentrating on peeling the label off his beer. Problems with the construction permits. Some inspectors wanted extra compensation to speed up the approvals. Extra compensation. Bribes. My son had been paying bribes using company funds. How much Ryan? At the beginning, they were small amounts. 2,000 here and 5,000 there. But then it got complicated. Complicated how one of the inspectors wanted a larger amount, much larger. He said that if I did not pay, he was not only going to deny our permits, but he was going to report the previous payments as attempted bribery. The air in the room felt increasingly dense. Ryan had fallen into a classic extortion trap. But the worst part was that he had used my company's money to finance his naivety. How much did you pay him? $20,000. 20,000. Added to the 30,000 he still owed from his other debts, we were talking about $50,000 that had come out of the company's operating funds. Ryan, where did you get those $20,000? From the company accounts. I thought I could replace them before you noticed. You stole $20,000 from my company. It is not theft, if I intended to return it. I stood up from the chair so abruptly that Ryan stepped back instinctively. The anger I had been containing since I arrived home finally found its escape. It is not theft, Ryan, you embezzled company funds. Do you have any idea what that means? Do you know the legal implications of what you have done? Dad, calm down. Your heart. No, do not tell me to calm down, I roared, feeling my blood pressure skyrocketing but not caring. You have destroyed 30 years of work. You have put the company at risk, the jobs of 50 families. My reputation. Everything. Ryan stood up too, his own anger emerging. Your reputation? Your reputation. It is always about you. What about my reputation? What about my life that is in danger because I owe money to people who would not hesitate to kill me? Your life is in danger because of your own stupid decisions. My stupid decisions were trying to grow your company, trying to impress you, trying to prove that I could handle important projects. We stood screaming at each other in my empty living room like two strangers who could not find a common language. But in the middle of that fight, something clicked in my mind. Ryan had mentioned that the debts were not just his. Ryan, you said the debts were not just yours. What else is there? His face went pale immediately. Dad, what else is there? There are other things. Investments I made thinking I could recover the money quickly. What kind of investments? Games, sports betting, casinos, online poker. My heart sank even further. Not only had he embezzled company funds, but he had developed a gambling addiction. How much have you lost gambling? I don't know exactly. I kept records at the beginning, but later. How much, Ryan? Probably another $20,000. $70,000. My son had accumulated debts of $70,000 between bribes, embezzlement, and gambling addiction. And that is not all, he continued, as if it were a relief to confess everything at once. The house. What about the house? I mortgaged it. The world stopped. The house our family home. The house where I had lived with his mother, where we had raised Ryan, where every room had memories of 30 years of family life. You mortgaged this house. I needed the collateral to get an emergency loan. For how much? $300,000. $370,000. Between the original debts and the mortgage, Ryan had put nearly $400,000 of family and business assets at risk. Ryan, I said with a voice so low I had to clear my throat so he could hear me. When is the mortgage due? In 2 weeks. 2 weeks. In 14 days, if Ryan did not pay $300,000, we would lose the house where I had lived for 30 years. I sat down slowly, feeling how the magnitude of the betrayal hit me in successive waves. It was not just that Ryan had sold my furniture. He had systematically destroyed everything we had built as a family. Dad, I know it looks terrible, but there is a solution. What solution? You have other assets. Investment properties, savings accounts, the company itself. If we liquidate some of those assets, if we liquidate, you are my father. We are family. These debts. Technically, they are family problems now. I stared at him, looking for some trace of the son I had raised, of the boy who had hugged me when he was afraid, of the young man who had promised me he would never disappoint me. Ryan, do you really think I'm going to liquidate my assets to pay your debts after what you have done? What alternative is there? If I don't pay, they're going to kill me. And if I lose the house, where are you going to live when you fully recover? It was pure emotional blackmail. Ryan was using both the threat to his own life and my need to have a home to pressure me into rescuing him from the consequences of his actions. Ryan, there is an alternative you have not considered. Which one now? That you face the consequences of your decisions without dragging me with you. His face hardened. Are you telling me that you are not going to help me? I'm telling you that I am not going to reward your betrayal by liquidating my estate. Ryan stood up abruptly, his beer falling to the floor and creating a puddle that spread across the empty floor. You know what, Dad? He shouted, his voice charged with a rage I had never heard before. You're right. Ryan, at 5 years old, losing his first tooth and running toward me with a toothless smile and eyes shining with excitement. I had invented an elaborate story about the tooth fairy just to see that smile again. I had stayed up until 3 in the morning, building a little ladder out of toothpicks so the mouse could reach his pillow. Ryan, at 8 years old, crying after some older kids bullied him at the park. Dad, why are there bad people? He had asked me while I bandaged a scrape on his knee. Not all people are bad, son. I had answered, just confused. Our job is to be better than them. What irony that now he was the one who had chosen to be the bad person in someone else's life. Ryan, at 12 years old, building a doghouse with me in the backyard. His small hands had struggled with the hammer, but he had insisted on doing all the work himself. I want to be a builder like you, Dad, he had told me. I want to make things that last forever. He had fulfilled his wish in a perverse way. He had built a debt that would last forever. Ryan, at 17, graduating as the valedictorian of his class. During his farewell speech, he had said, "Nothing I have achieved would have been possible without the example of my father, who taught me that hard work and honesty are the only paths to success." The audience had applauded while I fought to hold back tears of pride. That night, we had celebrated at the most expensive restaurant in the city, and he had insisted on toasting to the man with the most integrity I know. Ryan, at 21, the day he graduated from college, with honors in civil engineering. Dad, I want to work with you, he had told me. I want to learn everything you know about the business. I want Sanders Construction to be something we can share. I had wept with happiness, imagining the years we would work together, building not just buildings, but a family legacy. Ryan, at 25, the day of his wedding to Chloe, a sweet girl who had lasted barely 2 years in our lives before fleeing from what she called the suffocating shadow of the perfect father. During the ceremony, Ryan had changed the traditional vows for his own words. Chloe, I promise to love you with the same dedication and loyalty my father taught me. Now I understood that Chloe had seen something that I had been too blind to recognize. Each photograph was a stab of memories that contradicted the current reality. At what moment had the boy who built doghouses turned into the man who sold his father's furniture while he fought for his life in a hospital? When had the young man who spoke of integrity begun to steal from the family company accounts? My phone rang. It was Chloe Ryan's ex-wife. Mike, I heard you got out of the hospital. How do you feel? Chloe had been like a daughter to me during the 6 years she was with Ryan. Even after the divorce, we maintained occasional contact. She was one of the few people who really understood the complicated dynamic between Ryan and me. Physically better, emotionally it is complicated. Did something happen with Ryan? I told her everything. The sale of the furniture, the debts, the embezzlement, the mortgage, his wish that I had died in the hospital. Chloe listened in silence, sighing occasionally. Mike, I am not surprised, she said finally. What do you mean? Ryan has been living a double life for years. During our marriage, I saw things you didn't see because he behaved differently when you weren't present. What kind of things? Deep resentment toward you, envy of your success, an unhealthy obsession with proving he could surpass you. Why didn't you ever tell me anything? I tried, but you didn't want to listen. To you, Ryan was perfect, the ideal son who would follow in your footsteps and inherit your empire. Chloe was right. I had idealized Ryan so much that I had become blind to his real flaws. Chloe, why did you two really get divorced? Because Ryan was married to you, not to me. What do you mean? All his decisions were directed at impressing you or rebelling against you. He never made decisions based on what he really wanted or what was best for our relationship. It was like being married to someone else's shadow. And the gambling, it started during our last year of marriage. At first it was small bets on sports, then poker with friends. When I confronted him, he told me it was his way of feeling adrenaline outside of your control. Did you know about the embezzlement? Not specifically, but I knew he was taking financial risks he didn't fully understand. He always justified his mistakes by saying he was trying to grow the company faster to impress you. Every revelation was like discovering that I didn't really know my own son. The Ryan I thought I knew was a construction, a person who existed only in my imagination, and in the performances he acted out to maintain my approval. Chloe, do you think I am guilty of creating this monster? You are not guilty of his decisions, Mike, but you did contribute to creating a dynamic where Ryan never could develop an independent identity. He was always Mike Saunders' son before being Ryan Sanders. What should I do now? That is the difficult question. You can rescue him, which would reinforce the pattern of dependency that led him to this situation. Or you can let him face the consequences which could destroy him, but could also be the only way for him to learn. And if the consequences kill him, he owes money to very dangerous people. Mike Ryan is a 28-year-old adult. If he is really in danger of death, that was his decision. You cannot spend the rest of your life saving him from the consequences of his own choices. After hanging up with Chloe, I stayed in my room until very late into the night, reviewing every moment, every decision, every time I had chosen to protect Ryan instead of teaching him responsibility. I had been so effective at protecting him from failure that he had never learned to handle success responsibly. But I also understood something else that night. Ryan had taken consciously destructive decisions. He had chosen to steal, lie, gamble, and finally wish for my death. Regardless of my mistakes as a father, he was responsible for his actions as an adult, and for the first time in 28 years, I was going to allow him to face those consequences completely alone. That was the night I began to plan, not only how to deny him my help, but how to make sure he learned a lesson he would never forget. The next day I woke up with a mental clarity I hadn't had in years. For the first time since the heart attack, I felt completely energized. I had a mission: to understand exactly what Ryan had gotten himself into and who all the people involved in his web of debts and lies were. My first call was to Robert Vance, my accountant and friend of 20 years. Robert had handled the finances of Sanders Construction and Associates since its inception, and if anyone could help me unravel the financial damage Ryan had caused, it was him. Mike, it is good to know you are out of the hospital, Robert told me when he arrived at my house that morning. His expression changed immediately when he saw the state of my living room. What happened here? That is a long story that I need you to help me understand completely. I explained the whole situation to him. The sold furniture, Ryan's confessions about the debts, the embezzlement of company funds, the mortgage on the house. Robert took notes furiously, and his expression became graver with every detail. Mike, This is much worse than you imagine, he told me after reviewing the company documents I'd brought. Ryan didn't just steal $20,000 for bribes. He has been manipulating the accounts for at least 6 months. What do you mean? Look at these records. Transfers for operating expenses that do not correspond to any real project. Payments to suppliers that do not exist. Ryan has been creating fake expenses to justify cash withdrawals. Robert spread out spreadsheets that showed a complex network of fraudulent transactions. Ryan had systematically stolen nearly $40,000 from the company over the last few months. How did I not notice? Because Ryan handled the financial reports that you reviewed. He showed you edited versions that hid these transactions. The sophistication of the fraud shocked me. Ryan hadn't made desperate mistakes. He had executed a deliberate plan to steal from the family company for months. Robert, I need you to investigate everything. Every transaction, every account, every movement of money Ryan has made in the company's name. Are you considering legal action? I'm considering all options. My second call was to Mark Dillon, a private investigator I had used occasionally to verify the backgrounds of employees and potential partners. Mark had contacts in the financial world and in less legal circles that could help me understand exactly who Ryan was in debt to. Mark, I need you to investigate the activities of my son, Ryan Sanders, particularly his gambling debts and any loans he has obtained. Are you sure you want to know everything? Sometimes it is better not to know certain details about family. I want to know absolutely everything. Mark arrived at my house that afternoon with information that froze my blood. Ryan not only owed money to traditional lenders, he had fallen into the networks of criminal organizations that specialize in loans to compulsive gamblers. Your son owes money to 3 different groups, Mark explained, showing me photographs and documents. The first is relatively civilized, a private bank that handles high-risk loans, $20,000 with interest of 30% annually. And the other 2, more problematic. Tony, the Shark Marino, manages a group that lends money to players. Ryan owes him $15,000. And the third, the most dangerous group, the Sterling Brothers. The Sterling Brothers. I had heard that name in news reports about organized crime and money laundering. How much does he owe the Sterlings? $30,000. But here's the problem. The Sterlings don't just lend money. They also run illegal casinos, sports betting rings, and have a reputation for being extremely violent with debtors. How violent? Mark showed me newspaper photographs that I prefer not to remember in detail. The Sterling brothers had been implicated in disappearances, torture, and murders of people who did not pay their debts. Mike, your son, is in real danger. The Sterlings have made public examples of what happens when people don't pay. Ryan is not exaggerating when he says they are going to kill him. How much time does he have? According to my sources, they gave him an extension of 2 weeks after he made the first payment with the money from the furniture. But that was 3 days ago. He has 11 days left. In less than 2 weeks, if Ryan did not pay $30,000, the Sterling brothers would kill him. Mark, is there any way to negotiate with these people? The Sterlings do not negotiate. Either you pay in full with interest, or you face severe consequences. But there is something else you need to know. What? Ryan is not the only one on their list. When someone owes that much money, the Sterlings investigate the whole family. They know about you, about your company, about your properties. If Ryan cannot pay, they're going to come for you. The air in the room felt suddenly very thick. Not only was Ryan in danger, I was also a potential target. What do you recommend, honestly, that you pay your son's debts, and then get him out of the city, permanently? The Sterlings respect money, but they don't forget. Even if Ryan pays, he will always be on their radar. And if I don't pay, then both you and Ryan are going to have very serious problems very soon. That night, after Robert and Mark left, I sat in my room doing calculations. Ryan effectively owed nearly $70,000 to lenders and criminal organizations. The company had lost $40,000 through his thefts. The house was mortgaged for $300,000 more. In total, the financial damage caused by Ryan's decisions amounted to more than $400,000. I had the resources to pay those debts. My investment properties, savings accounts, and the value of the company totaled significantly more. I could liquidate assets, pay everything, and still keep enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But I also had another option. That night, I began to develop a plan that would not only deny my help to Ryan, but would teach him exactly what it meant to face the consequences of betraying family trust. It was a plan that would require precision, perfect timing, and an emotional coldness I'd never had to show before. But Ryan had chosen to turn me into his enemy when he wished for my death. Now he was going to discover how dangerous it could be to have Mike Sanders as an adversary. During the next 3 days, I became a dedicated student of my own son's life. Ryan believed he had 11 days to find $30,000 or face the consequences with the Sterling brothers. What he did not know was that I had decided to turn those 11 days into the most educational days of his life. My first movement was subtle but devastating. I called every bank where Ryan had accounts, and as an authorized co-signer since he was a minor, I froze every one of his credit cards and lines of credit. Officially, it was a family protection measure after suspicious activity on his accounts. Then I contacted Rose Ryan's secretary at the company and informed her that due to accounting irregularities that were being investigated, Ryan was temporarily suspended from all his functions and his access to corporate accounts was revoked immediately. "For how long, Mr. Sanders?" Rose asked, clearly confused. "Indefinitely." The third movement was even more strategic. I called each of the contractors and suppliers who worked regularly with us and informed them confidentially that Ryan no longer had the authority to make financial commitments in the company's name. If Ryan Sanders approaches you asking for loans, advances, or any type of credit using the company name, I told them he is not authorized to do so. In less than 72 hours, I had systematically cut off every source of easy money Ryan could have used to handle his crisis. But that was just the beginning. My fourth movement was the most elegant. I discreetly contacted the Sterling brothers through Mark, my private investigator. "Tell them Mike Sanders wants a meeting," I instructed Mark. "Mike, are you sure these people don't meet with civilians? Unless it is to collect debts or send messages. Tell them I have information about Ryan Sanders that will interest them." The meeting was arranged for that same night at a discreet restaurant on the outskirts of the city. The Sterling brothers turned out to be different from what I had imagined. Elegant, well-dressed, speaking with the polite courtesy of successful businessmen. "Mr. Sanders," said the older one, Frank Sterling, "we understand you want to discuss the subject of your son." "Exactly. Are you coming to pay his debts?" "I'm coming to make you a different proposal." Frank and his brother Michael exchanged interested glances. "Ryan owes you $30,000. I continued. "I have the financial capacity to pay that debt immediately." "Then I don't see what the proposal is," said Michael. "The proposal is that I am not going to pay." The silence at the table was absolute. The Sterling brothers looked at me with a mixture of confusion and rising danger. "Mr. Sanders," said Frank slowly, "do you understand the situation that leaves your son in perfectly? And are you willing to accept the consequences of that decision? I am here to propose an alternative that could be more interesting for you than simply collecting a debt." "We are listening." "Ryan has embezzled nearly $40,000 from my company. He has forged expense documentation, created fake suppliers, and has been stealing systematically for months." I showed them the evidence Robert had compiled. Bank records, fraudulent transfers, forged documents. "This information," I continued, "is enough to send him to prison for corporate fraud for 10 to 15 years. "And why would that interest us?" asked Michael. "Because I give you two options. You can kill him now and never recover the $30,000 he owes you, or you can help me teach him a lesson that will keep him under control for the rest of his life. And I will make sure that eventually you get paid your full debt with interest. To Frank leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of lesson? I want Ryan to experience exactly what it means to have no resources, no options, no one to rescue him. I want him to feel the complete terror of facing the consequences of his decisions. For how long? As long as it takes for him to learn, but I guarantee you that at the end of this process, Ryan will be a completely different person, and you will recover your money. Michael smiled for the first time. And if your son doesn't survive this lesson, then he will have learned the final lesson about the consequences of betrayal. The brothers looked at each other, communicating silently in the way only longtime partners can. "Mr. Sanders," said Frank finally, "your proposal is unusual, but we respect a man who understands that education sometimes requires extreme methods. Are you willing to consider our terms? I am listening. We will give your son 2 additional weeks. During that time, you can implement your educational methods. If at the end of those 2 weeks Ryan has not paid, or if you have not convinced us that your plan is working, we proceed with our traditional methods." "Understood? But Mr. Sanders," added Michael, "if your plan fails, you become responsible for your son's debt, the 30,000 plus accumulated interest. I accept those terms." We shook hands, sealing an agreement that would make the next 15 days the most terrible of Ryan's life. That night, back in my empty house, I finalized the details of my plan. Ryan had spent his life believing there would always be a safety net, that Dad would always rescue him, that he would never have to face real consequences. The next 15 days would teach him how wrong he was, but more importantly, they would teach him that when you betray family, when you steal, lie, and wish for your own father's death, there is a price to pay. And I was going to make sure Ryan paid that price in full. On the 4th day of my intensive education of Ryan, I received the call I had been waiting for. His voice sounded desperate without a trace of the arrogance he had shown when he screamed that I should have died in the hospital. "Dad, something terrible is happening. All my credit cards were canceled. The bank says there's a fraud investigation on my accounts." "Fraud? How strange," I replied with the tranquility of someone reading the morning paper. "And at the company, Rose told me I no longer have access to the corporate accounts. Do you know something about that? Ryan, after discovering you embezzled $40,000 of company funds, it was necessary to take protective measures. Dad, I need those accesses. The people I owe money to are not going to wait." Yes, the Sterling brothers." The silence on the line was absolute. "How do you know about the Sterlings?" "Ryan, did you really think you could accumulate debts of $70,000 with criminal organizations without me finding out? Dad, if you know about the Sterlings, then you understand how serious the situation is. They are going to kill me if I don't pay." "Yes, that is what I understand." "So, are you going to help me?" "No." Another long silence. "What do you mean, no?" "Ryan, 4 days ago you told me I should have died in the hospital so you could inherit my assets before losing them. Those words freed me from any paternal obligation toward you." "Dad, I was desperate. I didn't mean that." "Ryan, I am 58 years old. I have lived long enough to know that people say what they really think when they are under pressure. You really wished for my death. Please, I cannot face this alone. But you are going to?" I hung up. An hour later, Matt showed up at my house. He had lost weight in just 4 days. His clothes looked disheveled, and he had deep bags under his eyes that suggested he had not slept a wink. "Dad, we need to talk in person." I invited him in, offering him coffee with the same hospitality I had shown 4 days ago, before I discovered the full extent of his betrayal. "Matt, you look terrible. I have been living in my car for 2 days. My landlord kicked me out because I could not pay the rent." "Why couldn't you pay the rent?" "Because all my accounts are frozen. because you suspended me from the company, because you cut off all my sources of income. Correction, I cut off all the sources of income that depended on me and my money and my company. If you had developed independent resources during your 28 years, this would not be a problem. Matt ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration he had done since he was a child, when he could not solve a problem. Dad, I know I made mistakes, big mistakes, but I am your son. Are you really going to let me die? Matt, I am not going to let you die. I am going to let you live with the consequences of your decisions. It is the same thing. No, it is not the same thing. You have options. You can go to the police and confess to corporate fraud. You can file for bankruptcy. You can disappear and change your identity. You have many options that do not involve my money. Go to the police, they would put me in prison. Yes, probably 10 to 15 years for the fraud I documented. You documented it. I showed him the binder that Robert had prepared. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged document, every dollar stolen during the last 6 months. Matt, you have enough evidence here to be prosecuted for corporate fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and tax evasion. His face went completely white. Are you going to turn me into the police? That depends on you. What do you mean? If you find a way to pay the debts without involving my money, and if you return the $200,000 you stole from the company, we might consider resolving this as a family matter. Dad, that is impossible. Where am I going to get $500,000? That is your problem, not mine. Matt began to cry. I had not seen my son cry since he was 12 years old, and broke his arm falling off his bicycle. Dad, please, I am your only son. We are the only family we have. You stopped being my family the day you wished for my death. I cannot undo what you said. No, you cannot. But you can face the consequences. Matt stayed at my house for 3 hours, alternating between pleading threats, promises, and finally a despair that was painful to witness. But I did not change my position. When he finally left, I followed him discreetly. Just as I expected, he headed straight for the nearest bar, where he proceeded to get drunk, with money he had probably borrowed. That night, while Matt drowned in alcohol and self-pity, I made 2 important calls. The first was to Frank Vance. Mr. Vance, this is Ernest Sanders. I wanted to inform you that Matt just spent 3 hours at my house, begging for financial help, and was completely rejected. How did he take the rejection? Exactly as I expected. Despair begging, and finally acceptance that he is not going to receive help from his family. Interesting. What is the next step of your educational plan? Tomorrow, Matt is going to discover that his situation is even worse than he imagines. The second call was to Robert, my accountant. Robert, I need you to file a formal lawsuit against Matt tomorrow morning for corporate fraud. I want him to be officially prosecuted for the crimes he committed against the company. Ernest, are you sure once we file criminal charges there is no turning back? It is exactly what I want. Matt needs to learn that actions have legal consequences, not just family ones. And what if the Vances kill him before he gets to trial? That is a risk that Matt should have considered before getting into debt with criminal organizations. That night, for the first time since I returned from the hospital, I slept deeply. Matt had started his life believing that family was an unconditional safety net. The next 10 days would teach him that when you betray family, you end up completely alone. On the 7th day of my campaign, I received an unexpected visit that would completely change the dynamics of the situation. Dr. Morris, the cardiologist who had handled my case at the hospital, appeared at my door with a grave expression that immediately put me on alert. Ernest, we need to speak urgently, he said, entering without waiting for an invitation. There is something about your medical condition that I did not tell you before discharging you. My heart ironically began to race. What kind of something? Dr. Morris sat on one of the plastic chairs that now constituted my entire living room furniture set. He took out a thick medical folder and opened it with precise movements that suggested he had rehearsed this conversation. Ernest, the heart attack you suffered was not caused only by stress. It was a symptom of a much more serious condition. What condition? You have advanced dilated cardiomyopathy. Your heart is functioning at less than 30% of its normal capacity. The words floated in the air like toxic smoke. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that without immediate treatment, you probably will not live more than 6 months. 6 months. The number resonated in my head like a funeral bell. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I needed to confirm the diagnosis with additional studies. The results arrived yesterday. Dr. Morris showed me x-rays and reports that I did not completely understand, but that clearly showed a severely damaged heart. What treatment options do I have? 2 main options. Medication that could extend your life to 18 months, maybe 2 years, or a heart transplant that could give you a decade or more. What are the odds of getting a transplant? For someone of your age and condition, probably 6 months on the waiting list, if you are lucky. 6 months to get a transplant that could save my life. Exactly the same amount of time I had left to live without treatment. Dr. Morris, how much does a heart transplant cost? In the private sector, approximately $100,000 out of pocket, including the surgery, hospitalization, and post-operative medication for life. $100,000. An amount I had available, but that would be compromised if I decided to bail Matt out of his debts. And if I do not seek treatment, Ernest, you would die. Probably within 6 months, possibly less if you have another cardiac episode. After Dr. Morris left, I sat in my room processing this new information. Matt was not the only one with a death sentence pending. I was also running against the clock. But this revelation also gave me a completely different perspective on the situation with Matt. If I only had 6 months to live without treatment, then my educational plan had a deadline much more urgent than I had thought. My phone rang. It was Mark, my private investigator. Ernest, I have important news about Matt. I'm listening. He's been making desperate moves for the last 3 days. He tried to get loans from low-level loan sharks. He tried to pawn his car and his personal belongings. He even approached some of your competitors trying to sell information about the company. What kind of information? Client lists, details about current projects, technical specifications of construction in progress. Matt had escalated from stealing money from the company to trying to sell trade secrets. Every day that passed, his decisions became more desperate and more treacherous. Did he manage to sell anything? No. Apparently, your reputation in the industry is so solid that no one wanted to risk doing business with someone who is betraying you. Anything else? Yes. Matt approached the Vance brothers directly. He asked them for more time, but he also offered them something very interesting. What did he offer them? He offered you. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Matt told them that you have over $1 million in assets, that you are his only family, and that eventually you would have to rescue him to save your own life. He suggested that they kidnap you and force you to pay not only his debts, but a much larger amount. Matt had tried to hand over his own father to violent criminals to save his own skin. How did the Vances respond? Apparently, they found the proposal very interesting. Frank Vance told Matt that they would consider all options. I hung up with Mark and immediately called Frank Vance. Mr. Vance, Ernest Sanders here. I understand that my son had an interesting conversation with you. Mr. Sanders, your son is creative in his payment proposals. Are you going to act on his suggestion? That depends. Your educational plan has been entertaining to watch, but we need to see results soon. Your son owes us money, and one way or another, we are going to collect it. I understand. How much more time are you willing to give him? 5 days. After that, we implement our own methods, which could include the suggestions your son made to us. 5 days. and I had 6 months to live if I did not get medical treatment. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Matt had crossed the final line when he tried to hand me over to the Vances. It was no longer about education or family lessons. It was about survival. I called Robert, my accountant. Robert, I need you to liquidate all my assets tomorrow, except the house, investment properties, savings accounts, everything. Ernest, are you sure that is more than $750,000? I'm sure. What are you going to do with that much liquid cash? I'm going to teach Matt the difference between education and total destruction. After hanging up, I sat in my room making final calculations. Matt had chosen to make me not just his enemy, but his potential victim. He had tried to sell me to violent criminals. I no longer had a son to save. I had an enemy to neutralize. And the next 5 days would teach Matt that he had completely underestimated the capacity for revenge of a man who had nothing to lose. With $750,000 in cash available and only 6 months of life ahead of me, I had the resources and the motivation to implement the final phase of my plan. Matt had tried to deliver me to the Vance brothers, crossing the line between family betrayal and attempted murder. It was time for him to learn the consequences of turning his father into his mortal enemy. My first move was elegant in its simplicity. I contacted Frank Vance directly and made him a proposal he could not refuse. Mr. Vance, I want to buy Matt's debt. Buy it. Pay you the $150,000 that Matt owes you, plus $50,000 extra, as compensation for the trouble. In exchange, Matt owes me $200,000, and you no longer have to deal with him. Frank stayed silent for a long moment. Mr. Sanders, that is an unusual proposal. Why would you pay $200,000 to buy a debt of $150,000? Because Matt owes me much more than money. He owes me respect, loyalty, and apologies. I want to be the one who handles the collection of those debts. I understand. And if Matt cannot pay you, then you get your money back without risk, and I handle the consequences as I see fit. I accept. In a single transaction, I had eliminated the threat of immediate death that Matt faced, but I had transferred that debt to myself. Matt now owed me $200,000, plus the $200,000 he had embezzled from the company, plus the $150,000 from the mortgage on the house. $550,000 in total. My second move was even more devastating. I hired a team of lawyers specializing in asset recovery, and I gave them a single instruction: locate and seize every property account or asset that Matt might have anywhere in the country. He cannot have much, the lead attorney, Mary Ellen Ross, told me. According to our preliminary investigations, Matt Sanders has practically no wealth registered in his name. Look deeper. Investigate if he has properties in third-party names, offshore bank accounts, hidden investments, anything. The legal team worked with an efficiency that completely justified their fees. In 3 days, they had located an apartment that Matt had bought in the name of his ex-wife, Karen, a bank account in the Cayman Islands with approximately $10,000, and an investment in a restaurant business worth nearly $25,000. Can you seize everything? I asked. With the evidence of corporate fraud that you provided, we can argue that all these assets were acquired with money stolen from the company. A judge would authorize the seizure immediately. Proceed. My third move was the most personal. I contacted every person in Matt's life who might be willing to help him. College friends, work colleagues, even his ex-wife Karen. But I did not contact them to ask them not to help him. I contacted them to offer them money for information regarding any attempt by Matt to get financial help. If Matt Sanders approaches you asking for money loans or any kind of financial help, I told them, I will pay you double what he asks for just to inform me about the conversation. It was a complete surveillance network, funded by my own fortune. Karen Matt's ex-wife was the first to call. Ernest Matt came to see me yesterday. He looked desperate, almost unrecognizable. What did he want? He asked me to mortgage my house to lend him $100,000. He said it was literally life or death. And what did you tell him? I told him that I did not have 100,000 in equity in my house, which is true. But I also told him that even if I did, I would not lend it to him. How did he react? Ernest, he scared me. Matt had always been manipulative but never aggressive. Yesterday he seemed capable of violence. Did he threaten you? Indirectly. He said that if I did not help him, he would make sure everyone knew how our marriage really ended. What was he referring to? Karen stayed silent for a moment. Ernest, there are things about Matt that I never told you. Things I thought you did not need to know. Tell me now. Matt had problems with domestic violence. He never hit me, but he did push me. He threatened me. He destroyed my things when he was angry. The divorce was not for incompatibility. It was because I was afraid of him. Every conversation revealed new aspects of Matt's character that I had never seen. Not only was he a thief and a liar, but he also had tendencies toward violence when he was desperate. My fourth move was informational. I hired Mark to follow Matt discreetly 24 hours a day and report every movement, every conversation, every desperate plan he tried to implement. The reports I received were devastating. Day 1. Matt tried to pawn his watch, his graduation jewelry, and his laptop. Total obtained $750. Day 2. Matt approached a neighborhood loan shark asking for an emergency loan. He was rejected for lack of collateral. Day 3. Matt spent 14 hours in a casino trying to multiply the $750 he had gotten by pawning his belongings. He lost everything. Day 4. Matt slept in his car in a shopping mall parking lot. He has not eaten a full meal in 2 days. Matt was disintegrating physically and emotionally exactly as I had planned. But my fifth move was the cruelest. I decided to make direct contact. I called him when I knew he was at his most vulnerable, 3 in the morning, when he was probably awake in his car, terrified and without options. Matt, this is your father speaking? Dad? His voice sounded broken, completely defeated. Dad, please, I can't take it anymore. Matt listened to me carefully. I bought your debt from the Vance brothers. Now you owe me $200,000. What do you mean? I mean that you no longer have to worry about the Vances killing you. Now you have to worry about your father destroying you completely. Dad, I don't understand. Matt, during the last 2 weeks, you have learned what it means to have no money, no options, no hope. But that was just the warm-up. What are you going to do? I am going to teach you what it means to have the man who gave you life as an enemy. I hung up. Matt had believed that the worst thing that could happen was that the Vance brothers would kill him. He was about to discover that there were things much worse than death. Matt appeared at my door at 6 in the morning, 3 hours after my phone call. He looked like a homeless person, clothes wrinkled hair, messy eyes sunken, and a smell that suggested he had not bathed in days. But the most shocking thing was the desperation in his eyes. A desperation I recognized because it was exactly what I had planned to create. Dad, I need to understand what is happening, he said with a voice that trembled with exhaustion and terror. Come in, Matt. I think it is time you have a complete understanding of your situation. I guided him to my bedroom, where I had prepared a presentation that I had been organizing for days. On my table, I had folders labeled with every aspect of Matt's life that I had been systematically dismantling. Sit down, I told him, pointing to the only available chair. We are going to review exactly what has happened over the last 2 weeks. I opened the first folder. Debts paid by your father. $200,000 to the Vance brothers, plus $50,000 additional compensation. Matt looked at me with absolute confusion. You paid my debts? I bought your debts. Now you owe me instead of owing them. I opened the second folder. Assets seized. Your apartment registered in Karen's name. Your bank account in the Cayman Islands. And your share in the restaurant business. Total recovered $35,000. You seized my properties? They were properties bought with money stolen from my company. Technically, they were always mine. I opened the third folder. private investigation. During the last 10 days, I have had investigators following you 24 hours a day. Every movement, every conversation, every desperate plan you have tried. I showed him photographs of him sleeping in his car, asking strangers for money, trying to pawn personal belongings. You have been spying on me. Matt, I have been studying you, like a scientist studies a specially interesting specimen. I opened the fourth folder, the thickest one, criminal evidence compiled, corporate fraud, embezzlement, forgery of documents, tax evasion. This folder contains enough evidence to send you to prison for 15 years. Matt went completely pale. And finally, I said, opening the last folder, testimonies from every person in your life you might have considered a potential ally. I showed him written statements from Karen about the domestic violence, from his college friends about his manipulative behavior, from work colleagues about his professional dishonesty. You paid people to speak against me. I didn't have to pay them. I just had to ask them. Matt, the image you had of yourself as someone loved and respected was completely false. People have been tolerating you for years, not loving you. Matt began to cry in a way I had not seen since he was a little boy, deep sobs that shook his whole body. Dad, why are you doing this? Do you really not understand? I am your son. No, I said with a calm that surprised me. My son died the day he told me I should have died in the hospital. My son died when he stole money from our family company. My son died when he mortgaged the house where he grew up. My son died when he tried to sell me to violent criminals. Dad, I was desperate. I did terrible things, but I am still your son. Matt, let me explain something to you about fatherhood that apparently you never understood. Being a father does not mean rescuing your son from the consequences of his decisions. It means teaching him to make decisions from which he does not need to be rescued. But I already learned the lesson I have suffered for 2 weeks. What lesson did you learn exactly? Matt wiped his eyes, trying to articulate an answer. I learned that I cannot depend only on you to solve my problems. That is the lesson you learned. Yes. Then you learned nothing. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard where Matt had played as a child. The lesson you should have learned is that actions have consequences. That betrayal destroys relationships. That when you hurt the people who love you, you lose the right to expect their love in return. But I love you, Dad. I turned toward him. Matt, love is not a word you say. It is a decision you make every day. And you have spent the last few months making decisions that demonstrate exactly the opposite of love. What can I do to fix this? Nothing. Nothing. Matt, some mistakes cannot be fixed. Some relationships cannot be repaired. Some consequences are permanent. Matt stayed silent for several minutes, processing the finality of my words. What is going to happen to me now? That is your decision. You can go to the police and confess your crimes, face the legal consequences, and start your life over after serving your sentence. Or you can keep running, keep lying, keep hoping someone else solves your problems. And if I choose the first option, if I confess everything, then I will testify in your favor during the sentencing. I will tell the judge that you finally took responsibility for your actions. And if I choose the second, then I will hand this evidence to the authorities and make sure you receive the maximum sentence possible for every charge. Matt stood up slowly like a defeated man finally accepting his defeat. Dad, there is something you need to know. What is, When I said you should have died in the hospital, a part of me really meant it. But another part of me, the part that is still your son, is grateful you survived to teach me this lesson. Why? Because for the first time in my life, I understand who I really am. And I understand that if I am going to change, I have to do it myself. Matt walked toward the door. Then he stopped. Dad, I am going to the police this afternoon. I am going to confess everything. Matt? Yes. That is the first right decision you have made in years. 6 months later, I found myself in the waiting room of the Central Hospital, with my new heart beating strong in my chest. The transplant had been a complete success, and the doctors had declared that I had decades of life ahead of me. The irony did not escape me. While Matt was serving an 8-year sentence in prison, I had obtained a second chance at life. The perfect revenge had not been destroying Matt. It had been teaching him the lessons he should have learned during his first 28 years of life, and it worked in ways I would have never imagined. My phone rang. It was Robert, my accountant, with updates on the company. Ernest, things are going better than expected. Without Matt sabotaging operations, the company is running more efficiently than ever. We have completely recovered the funds he embezzled, and this quarter's profits are the highest in 5 years. And the clients? None left when they found out about the scandal. On the contrary, several commented that they respect the way you handled the situation. They said that a man who does not tolerate dishonesty, not even from his own son, is someone they can trust completely. My professional reputation had not only survived Matt's betrayal, it had strengthened. The construction industry valued integrity over blind family loyalty. Karen, Matt's ex-wife, visited me that afternoon at the hospital. Ernest, I wanted to thank you for something you probably did not expect me to thank you for. What? For teaching Matt what I could never teach him, that actions have real consequences. Have you spoken to him since he has been in prison? Once. He asked for my forgiveness for the domestic violence, for the lies, for everything. It was the first time I saw him take genuine responsibility for something. How is he handling prison? Surprisingly well. He is studying to get a degree in accounting. He says that when he gets out, he wants to earn a living, honestly, even if that means starting from the bottom. And the drugs, the gambling. He is in a rehab program for addictions. The counselors say he is making good progress, because he finally admits he has real problems he needs to solve. It was exactly what I had hoped for. Matt had needed to lose everything, including his freedom, to finally face his personal demons. Doctor? Morris, my cardiologist, arrived with the results of my most recent post-operative exams. Ernest, medically, you are a miracle. Your new heart is functioning perfectly. You could live another 30 years with this organ. 30 additional years of life. Time enough to completely rebuild my legacy. To see if Matt really changed after his release. To decide what kind of relationship, if any, we could have in the future. Dr. Morris, did the stress of the last few months affect the success of the transplant? Interestingly, no. In fact, I think having a clear purpose during your recovery, even if that purpose was resolving a difficult family situation, helped your immune system accept the new heart more quickly. My revenge had been literally healthy for me. Mark, my private investigator, called me with the final report on the fallout of the whole situation. Ernest, I thought you would be interested to know the current status of everyone involved in Matt's case. Tell me. The Vance brothers have publicly expressed respect for how you handled the situation. They say any future business with you would be considered top priority, due to your professional approach to solving family problems. Even criminals respected my handling of Matt's betrayal. Dr. Harris, the corrupt doctor who had been facilitating fake documents for some of Matt's schemes, was arrested last week in a separate investigation. Apparently your case inspired other victims to report him, and the other debtors who were in similar situations to Matt. Several parents have contacted my office asking for consultations on how to handle adult children with gambling addictions and criminal debts. Your approach is becoming a model. I had inadvertently become an example for other parents facing family betrayals. That night, in my restored house with new furniture bought with the money, recovered from Matt's seized assets, I wrote a letter to deliver to my son in 2 years, when he would be eligible for parole. Matt, if you are reading this letter, it means you have served at least half of your sentence and that you have demonstrated enough rehabilitation to be considered for parole. That would be the first step toward earning back my respect. This experience taught me that my mistake as a father was not being too controlling, as you believed. My mistake was not teaching you that real love includes allowing people to face the consequences of their decisions. If you have really changed, if you have really learned that integrity is more important than easy profits, then when you get out of prison, we might consider slowly rebuilding a relationship. But it will be a completely new relationship between two men who respect each other, not between a permissive father and a manipulative son. Your father who survived both your betrayal and his own broken heart, Ernest Sanders. The perfect revenge had not been to destroy Matt's life. It had been to rebuild my own life in a way that no longer depended on him, was no longer vulnerable to him, and that demonstrated to him exactly what he had lost when he chose betrayal over loyalty. Matt had wished for me to die so he could inherit my money. Instead, he had lost his freedom, while I gained additional years of life. He had tried to sell me to criminals to save his own skin. Instead, I had gained the respect of both criminals and honest businessmen. He had stolen from our company, hoping I would never notice. Instead, the company was more prosperous than ever without him. The perfect revenge was that Matt had lost everything he valued, while I had gained everything that really mattered: health, respect, purpose, and the satisfaction of knowing I had acted with integrity, even when facing the most painful betrayal possible. And if Matt really learned his lessons in prison, if he really became the man he had always had the potential to be, then my revenge would become the most valuable gift I had ever given him: the opportunity to live an authentic life based on real principles instead of false expectations. Time would tell what the final result of my 2-week intensive education had really been. But regardless of what Matt chose to do with the rest of his life, I knew I had made the right decisions, and that was the only revenge that really mattered.